Okay, welcome back to another of my video tutorial series. Today I'll be focusing on dimensioning. This is a very important topic. What is dimension? Dimension is pretty much a numerical value which is given to distance between 2 points. There are quite a number of rules or guidelines that one should ensure that he maintains when dimensioning. Good dimensioning is very, very important. As For engineer, architects, and jobs persons, correct dimension drawing helps to eliminate guesswork or prevents error in a drawing. There are some rules that we need to follow, some basic drawing rules that we need to apply when dimensioning. Here I have a checklist of approximately 13 rules or guidelines that one should follow when dimensioning an object. Here I have two drawings. I have plane and solid geometry and also a building drawing. The first one here, a drawing should be correctly dimensioned. All necessary dimensions required to produce the drawing should be given. So well-dimensioned drawing has all the necessary dimensions required to produce the drawing. That's very important. Very important. All right, so all dimensions required. So if you look across on this drawing, you will notice that this drawing has all the necessary, it's fully dimensioned. We have an overall dimension here. We have a distance from the center here to the end of this line. We also have an overall dimension here, which prevents us from pretty much calculating these. All right. We also have the radius and where the radius is taken from. We also have an angle here of 66 degrees. Also the overall length for this slope. It's important to note a dimension is pretty much a distance between 2 points. And dimension line is this line here, which contains two shaded arrows or forward slashes. Typically for building drawing, we use forward slashes, and for leaders and plane and solid geometry or smaller drawing, we normally use arrows. Very important. Here is a checklist. The first one says that all necessary dimension. Before submitting your drawing, it's advisable that you go through a similar checklist like this. First, check to ensure that all necessary dimensions required to produce a drawing are supplied. So ask yourself this question: would I be able to produce this drawing giving from the dimensions given? Will I be able to complete to draw this figure from the dimensions given? If not, then that drawing would need to be dimensioned some more. I would need additional dimensioning. Next thing, the extension line should always be perpendicular to the drawing or to the figure. So here we have the figure outlined in a thicker line, and these are our extension lines. So our extension lines should always be perpendicular to the side being dimensioned or the points being dimensioned. In this case, we have a sloped side, and again, you'll notice that the extension line is perpendicular or parallel. Extension line is perpendicular and the dimension line is parallel. Very important. Another important thing we need to ensure, always check to ensure that your dimension line touches both extension lines. Very, very important. Ever so often I notice students, I've seen it, persons who um, probably didn't learn to dimension correctly. They pretty much just add an arrow, a line, and two arrows, and not taking time out to ensure that the arrow touches the extension line. So That's very important. Your your extension line should touch your dimension line at 2 points. Yes, very important. All right. It's important to note that you're also, in most cases, we normally use one of two types of ends. We normally use either forward slash for typically for building drawing and shaded arrows. I recommend that you use shaded arrows for plane and solid geometry and annotation or leaders. Very important. Also, check to ensure that the extension line and the dimension line are thinner than the outline. Yes, there needs to be a distinction between the drawing, the outline for the drawing and your dimension line, as stated here. Clear distinction. So this is made from zero 0.3 millimeters line, while this is 0.25. Very important. Next thing, also check to ensure that your extension line extends slightly beyond your dimension line. Like here, your extension line should extend slightly beyond the dimension line. Very important. Very important. Yeah. Also, dimensions should be placed in most cases or ideally in the middle of the drawing. Yes. So check to ensure that your dimension line is placed in the middle of the drawing. And it should not touch the drawing. Yeah, so there should be a space here between your dimension line and the dimension. There's a space there. Yeah, in some cases where your dimension line may cut into the your dimension may cut into the dimension line, like in a case like this. Very important. And of great importance, there should be a minimum of 10 millimeters between your drawing and your dimension line. Yes, minimum 10 millimeters between your dimension and your extension line. Attention should also be placed to the extension line. There should be a gap of between extension line should not touch the drawing, and it's very important. There should be a gap of between 3 to 5 millimeters, depending on which method you're using. For traditional drawing, between 3 to 5 millimeters. For AutoCAD plane and solid geometry, probably 1.5, 2 is good. For building drawing, which is much larger, you'd want a gap of between probably 100 millimeters or so.
Daddy, here. Oh, what's like?
Thanks. Where possible, dimension line should always be placed on the outside of the drawing, like in this case. Again, where possible. And this is ideal for plane and solid geometry. But in most cases for building drawing, you would need to place dimensions on the inside. And that's very important. So here we have 95, 30, 60, and these are all placed on the outside. For this section, it's not really possible to place this on the outside, or it would make it look a bit too fussy or too crowded to place this on the outside. So in cases like these, you can place this on the inside. And in cases like here, these are okay to be placed on the inside. Very important. It's also important to note that all units must be converted to millimeters, which is the standard unit for drawing in AutoCAD, for CXC and in the Caribbean. So in cases where you will find cases where CXC or other papers might send units such as millimeters, such as meters or kilometers. The first thing to do is to convert those units to millimeters before you actually dimension a drawing. Very important. Next thing, there should be no suffix at the end of a dimension. Example here, so you see we have no millimeters or centimeters, no millimeters at the end. Yeah, no millimeters. So it's assumed that the drawing is already in millimeters, as millimeter is the standard dimension. And it's common practice to make a notation stating that all dimensions are in millimeter. Or in most cases, it is assumed that the units are in millimeters for a drawing. All right. Also, for radiuses and diameters, we use big R with an arrow to indicate the radius, and typically a line is drawn from the center to the circumference. And in cases like this, the arrow can either be on the outside, like in this case, or it can also be like this. It can also be on the inside. It could also be here. Either way works. There could be a case like this, circle here. It could also be like this, radius here, and the big R on the side like that. Big R plus your value, say this is 10, place our 10 there. That also works. We also use a diameter symbol to represent a diameter. And the diameter symbol is a circle with a line drawn through the middle. That is used to represent circular objects. And in cases the view that you're looking at you might not be able to determine if the object is square, rectangular, or circular. In a case like this, where we have a cylinder, cylinder, when if you were to look at this orthographically, you would see the front, which would look flat, but in reality, it is a cylinder. So in cases like these, you would use the symbol to establish that it is diameter. So you would use your extension line, your symbol for diameter, followed by your value. Say this is 20. And of course, you'd have your arrows at both ends, as per usual. So let's review what we have gone through so far. So for dimension, remember, when dimensioning a figure, always ensure that you provide enough all dimensions necessary to complete the drawing. Very, very important. All right, always provide that. Next thing, always check to ensure that your extension line doesn't touch the drawing. Very important. Next tip is always use shaded arrows. Always use shaded arrows when you're dimensioning plane and solid geometry or using leaders. Next thing, always ensure that please check to ensure also that your extension line is not closer than 10 millimeters to the drawing. Very important. Yeah. And very importantly, you use center line. Use your center line to establish the center for round circles. Yes, I don't think I place much emphasis on this. So the center line, it's pretty much like a bullseye. So we use this to establish center for a circular object. Yeah, just like in the case here. Very important. And we always use forward slash for a building drawing, shaded arrows for plane and solid geometry. Yeah, very important. Also, that is pretty much all there is for dimensioning. Very important. Yeah. And for angles also we also use shaded arrows. And it's a good rule. It's a good practice when you're drawing your arrows not to make them too thick, not to make your arrows point your arrowheads too thick. Uh, Practice I normally use, then I normally draw, then I come down like this and then go out. Start at the point here, go a little way down, then out a couple of times to get it. So it's nice. A rule states that your arrow length should be approximately 3 times the width, or ideally this should be approximately 3 millimeters, 3 millimeters to 1 millimeter wide, ideally. All right.